This is the first lesson in our Imperialism unit, and the big idea for this lesson is that powerful industrialized nations sought to gain power and economic might by building empires. The essential questions: what factors led to the new imperialism of the 1800s, and how did Western nations come to dominate much of the world in the late 1800s? The aim of the lesson: analyze the causes of the new imperialism, explain why Western imperialism spread so rapidly, and describe the different forms of new imperialist rule. Let's set the stage. By the 1800s, Europe had gained considerable power. Strong centrally governed nation states had emerged, and the industrial nation had greatly enriched European economies. Encouraged by their new economic and military strength, Europeans embarked on a path of aggressive expansion. Now we're going to look at two different types of imperialism: old imperialism and new imperialism. Under old imperialism, European powers did not usually acquire territory, except for Spain and Portugal in South America, but rather built a series of trading stations, and they would build these trading stations along the coast. Respected and frequently cooperated with local rules in India, China, Japan, and Indonesia, and other areas where trade flourished between locals and European coastal trading centers. The new imperialism tended to favor direct conquest and formal empire. Africa and Asia had seen limited European intrusion, and most contacts had been coastal in nature. Now entire continents came under European influence. The two maps seen here will give us a better understanding between old imperialism and new imperialism. Old imperialism is on the left, and new imperialism is on the right. The map on the left will show the different trading centers along the coast, where the Europeans mostly spent their time. On the right, you can see the difference with the new imperialism, that the Europeans were now taking over the entire continent. Europe's influence continued to expand during the 1800s for all the same reasons. What was new in this was the extent. For the first time, European imperialism became global in nature, with Britain the world leader. The map above, anywhere you see red, is a colony of the British Empire. So you can see that the British Empire had colonies throughout the world. And the quote on the bottom: "The sun never sets on the British Empire," where if the sun is setting in one part of the world, maybe the 13 colonies in Canada, the sun is coming up by India and what would eventually be known as Australia. So you can see the control that the British Empire had throughout the world. Now let's look at some of the causes of imperialism. First, the Industrial Revolution. There was demand for natural resources: rubber, petroleum, manganese for steel, and palm oil. New markets of consumers whom they could sell their factory goods. Colonies offered a valuable outlet for Europe's growing population to move and live in. And bankers and entrepreneurs looked for ways to invest their profits. These are examples of how economic interests spur expansion. There were also political and military reasons for imperialism. Countries wanted new military and naval bases to protect one's interests against other European powers. Colonies were important bases for resupplying ships. The British were concerned about France and Germany expanding their empires and their imperialistic goals, and ruling a global empire increased the nation's prestige around the world. This is nationalism. There were humanitarian and religious goals that are connected with causes of imperialism. Westerners felt a genuine concern for their little brothers beyond the seas. Missionaries, doctors, and colonial officials believed they had a duty to spread what they saw as the blessing of Western civilization, including its medicine, law, and the Christian religion. Social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, is also a cause of imperialism. Behind the idea of Europe's civilizing mission was a growing sense of racial superiority. Most applied Darwin's ideas about natural selection and survival of the fittest to human societies. European races, they argued, were superior to all others, and imperial domination of weaker races was simply nature's way of improving the human species. Let's look at this review question. The theory of social Darwinism was sometimes used to justify A. the establishment of communist governments in Asia, B. Latin American revolutions in the early 19th century, C. the independence movement in India, D. European imperialism in the late 19th century. Please pause the video. The answer is D. European imperialism in the late 19th century. Let's look at this review question. What factors contributed to European imperialism in the 1800s? This is also what were the causes of imperialism. Economic motives, political and military goals, humanitarian and religious beliefs, and social Darwinism. Now let's look at The White Man's Burden. The White Man's Burden was a poem written by Rudyard Kipling, and a burden is something that weighs somebody down. And the white man's burden became a phrase used to justify European imperialism, or an excuse on why England should have the continent of Africa as their colony. And as an example, England believed that it was their duty, the duty of the white man, to bring education and Western culture to the non-white people of their colonies. And the white man's burden gives the feeling that colonization is necessary, an expectation of the white man, and even a duty of the white man. Kipling's poem is given from the perspective of a white man, probably British or American, speaking to his fellow white men. Let's look at this review question. The 19th century term white man's burden reflects the idea that 1. Asians and Africans were equal to Europeans. 2. Asians and Africans would be grateful for European help. 3. Imperialism was opposed by most Europeans. 4. Europeans had a responsibility to improve the lives of the colonial peoples. Please pause the video. The answer is 4. Europeans had a responsibility to improve the lives of the colonial peoples. Why was there a rapid spread of Western imperialism? First, the weakness of non-Western states. While European nations had grown stronger in the 1800s, several older civilizations were in decline, especially the Ottoman Middle East, the Mughal Empire in India, and the Qin Empire in China. There were also Western advantages. European powers had the advantages of strong economies, well-organized governments, and powerful armies and navies. Superior technology included the Maxim machine guns, repeating rifles, and steam-driven warships. Let's look at this review question. How did Western imperialism spread through Africa and Asia so quickly? Westerners had strong economies, governments, and technologies. Let's answer the essential questions. What factors led to the new imperialism of the 1800s? First, economic motives, political and military goals, humanitarian and religious beliefs, and social Darwinism. How did Western nations come to dominate much of the world in the 1800s? European nations grew stronger in the 1800s while older civilizations around the world were in decline. This is the end of the lesson. Please complete the assignment that goes along with this lesson.